Alien girl casually goes into heat, increasing her feminine parts after smelling human sweat. Connor Mitchell's muscles burn with the satisfying ache of a good workout. Sweat glisten on his bare torso, trickling down the defined ridges of his abdomen as he completed his final set of deadlifts in the station's gym. The massive interstellar hub known as Nexus Station was home to dozens of species, but the gym was blissfully empty this cycle, just how he preferred it. He grabbed his towel, wiping his face and running it through his damp light brown hair, the military grade. Environmental systems kept the station at a perfect temperature for most species, but human physiology ran hot. During exercise, Connor had been stationed on Nexus for 6 months, now as part of Earth's diplomatic exchange program, and he still hadn't fully adjusted to the artificial gravity or the constant hum of the station systems. The pneumatic doors hissed open, and Connor glanced up, his blue eyes widening slightly at the newcomer. A female Vidian stepped into the gym, her emerald green skin catching the light. Her silver hair cascaded down her back in a shimmering waterfall, and her athletic frame was showcased in a form-fitting gray tank top and shorts that emphasized her lean physique. Connor nodded politely before turning back to his weights. Vidians were known throughout the galaxy as exceptional scientists and diplomats, their civilization having achieved space travel centuries before humans. This particular Vidian seemed focused on her own workout, heading straight for the cardio equipment. Good cycle, she said in perfect English, her voice melodic with a slight accent common to her species. Good cycle, Connor replied, continuing to rack his weights. He was accustomed to the various alien species on the station, but interaction was typically limited to professional settings. The gym was usually a sanctuary. The Vidian woman began her warm-up routine, and Connor couldn't help but notice her graceful movements. There was something almost hypnotic about the way she moved, each motion precise and fluid. He was about to head for the showers when he heard a small gasp. Turning, he saw the Vidian woman frozen in place, her eyes wide, hands clutching at her midsection. You all right?" Connor asked, taking a step toward her. She didn't respond immediately, her silver eyes darting around the room before landing on him. As she began, then stopped her body, shuddering slightly. "Something's happening." Connor moved closer, concern etching his features. "Do you need medical assistance I can call?" "No," she exclaimed, backing away. "No doctors, just stay back for a moment." Connor halted, respecting her space, but remaining alert. The Vidian woman was breathing heavily, now her hands moving from her midsection to her chest, and then, to Connor's astonishment, to her backside. Before his eyes, her body began to change. Her already athletic form seemed to fill out, her chest swelling visibly beneath her tank top, the fabric straining against a sudden expansion, but most dramatically her hips and buttocks expanded rapidly, taking on a pronounced curvaceous shape that strained against her shorts. "Holy ___" Connor muttered, unable to tear his eyes away. "What's happening to you?" The Vidian woman looked mortified, attempting to cover herself with her arms, though the changes made this increasingly futile. "It's a biological response," she managed, her voice strained. "Something triggered my reproductive cycle. This isn't supposed to happen here." Connor's mind raced. He studied xenobiology as part of his diplomatic training, but nothing had prepared him for this. "What triggered it? Is there something I can do to help?" She looked at him, her silver eyes wide with a mixture of embarrassment and something else, something primal. "It's you," she said quietly. "You're sent human male pheromones during physical exertion. They're similar to Vidian mating signals." Connor felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with his workout. "My sweat triggered this." She nodded, attempting to maintain her dignity despite her rapidly changing physiology. "I'm Alani, by the way," she said, a hint of dark humor in her voice. "I'd shake your hand, but I'm a bit preoccupied at the moment." Despite the bizarre situation, Connor couldn't help but smile. "Connor Mitchell, and I think handshakes might be the least of our concerns right now." Eleni attempted to adjust her clothing, which was now comically ill-fitted to her new proportions. "I need to get back to my quarters before anyone sees me like this. The changes should stabilize soon." But she gestured helplessly at her transformed body. "Let me help." Connor offered, grabbing his jacket from his gym bag. "Here to wrap this around your waist. I'll escort you to your quarters." Alani hesitated, then accepted the jacket, tying it around her hips. "Thank you. This is not how I imagined meeting one of the station's human diplomats." "Trust me," Connor said with a smile, "this is an in the diplomatic handbook either. As they made their way toward the exit, Connor couldn't help but notice the graceful sway of Elon's newly enhanced figure, and he found himself wondering what other surprises interspecies interactions might hold. Little did either of them know that their chance encounter would soon entangle them in a web of interstellar politics, ancient biological mysteries, and an attraction that defied the boundaries of their respective species. Alani's quarters were located in the science wing of Nexus Station A, considerable distance from the recreational facilities. Every step of their journey through the stations curved corridors felt like an eternity. As she struggled to maintain her composure, Connor walked slightly ahead, occasionally stopping to ensure the path was clear before motioning her forward. Almost there, he reassured her. As they approached the residential section designated for Vidian personnel, Ilani nodded gratefully, her silver hair partially obscuring her flushed face. The biological changes had stabilized, but her body remained dramatically altered. Her feminine attributes now prominently displayed despite Connor's jacket tied around her waist. Door code 72991 Alpha, she whispered as they reached her quarters. Connor input the sequence, and the door slid open with a soft hiss once. Inside, Elaine let out a long breath. Leaning against the wall, her quarters were sparsely decorated but distinctly alien crystal-like structures that humans might mistake for art pieces served as Vidian data storage, and the lighting had a subtle green tint that mimicked the sunlight of her home world. "Thank you," she said, finally meeting Connor's eyes. "This is mortifying, but it could have been much worse without your help." Connor maintained a respectful distance, his diplomatic training kicking in. "No need for thanks. Is there anything else you need? Should I contact someone from your delegation?" And Ilani said quickly, then composed herself. "No, please. This is a private matter. On 80 of these cycles are sacred and personal. If my superiors learn that a human triggered my response." She trailed off, her silver eyes clouding with worry. Connor nodded, understanding the implications. Inner species relations were delicate, and unexpected biological compatibilities could complicate diplomatic efforts. "Your secret's safe with me, but if you don't mind my asking, what exactly happened back there?" "I thought Vidians had complete control over their reproductive systems." Ilani moved to a sleek console, tapping a sequence that dimmed the light slightly. "We do. Typically, our reproductive cycles are voluntary, activated through specific hormonal treatments and rituals." She gestured to her transformed body. "The spontaneous response is unprecedented at least officially." Connor raised an eyebrow. Eleni hesitated, then sighed. "There are legends, old stories from when Vidians first encountered other space-faring races, tales of spontaneous fertility responses to certain species, but they are considered myths, not science, until today." Connor added, "Until today," she agreed, a small smile playing at her lips despite her embarrassment. "I'm a xenobiologist specializing in comparative physiology." "The irony isn't lost on me," Connor chuckled. "So you're saying I just became a case study?" Perhaps. Eleni replied, her scientific curiosity visibly overcoming her embarrassment. "Human physiology has always been fascinating. Your species adapts quickly, evolves rapidly compared to most." And now she gestured to herself. "Again, there appears to be some unexpected chemical compatibility." Connor was about to respond when his communicator chimed, glancing at the display. He grimaced. "Ambassador Cheston, I'm late for a briefing. You should go." Ilani said, "I'll be fine now. The physical changes will remain for approximately 72 hours, but the urges should subside soon." Connor felt heat rise to his face again. "Urges, right. Well, if you need anything, I have your jacket," Eleni said, with a hint of mischief. "I suppose that means we'll have to meet again." "I suppose it does," Connor agreed, moving toward the door. "For purely diplomatic reasons, of course." Ilani echoed, her silver eyes sparkling. "Diplomatic relations between our species clearly need further exploration." As Connor left Ilani's quarters, he couldn't help but smile. 6 months on Nexus Station had been professionally rewarding, but personally isolating. Now an accidental biological reaction had created the most interesting connection he'd made since leaving Earth. His communicator chimed again, more insistently. This time Ambassador Cheston was not known for her patience. Connor quickened his pace, his mind still half occupied with thoughts of Emerald SK in silver eyes. The diplomatic briefing room hummed with quiet conversation when Connor arrived, slightly out of breath and still in his workout clothes. Ambassador Cheston astern Woman with a reputation for impeccable standards fixed him with a disapproving stare. "Mr. Mitchell, how kind of you two. Join us," she said, her voice cool. "My apologies," Ambassador Connor replied. Sliding into an empty seat, there was a situation in the gym that required my attention, a diplomatic situation, I hope. Chess responded, "Since that is your actual job," before Connor could formulate. A responsive doors opened again, and a delegation of Vidians entered. Connor recognized most of them from previous meetings, high-ranking scientists and diplomats representing their home world's interests on Nexus Station. What he didn't expect was a tall, imposing Vidian male at their center whose elaborate silver robes and stern expression marked him as someone of significant importance. "Ambassador Cheston, the Vidian leader, said, his voice deep and resonant. "Thank you for accommodating this unscheduled meeting." Cheston bowed slightly. "High Counselor Thean, NEX Station is honored by your unexpected visit." Connor stiffened in his seat. High Counselor Thean was one of the most powerful political figures in the Vidian conclave, rarely seen outside their home world. His presence on the station was significant and potentially troubling. "I come on a matter of some delicacy." Thean continued, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on Connor. The Vidian eyes narrowed slightly. "It concerns the integration of humans into our shared galactic community." Chess' expression remained neutral, but Connor could sense her tension. "We believed our integration was proceeding smoothly and has something occurred to suggest otherwise." Thawne made a gesture that Connor recognized as the Vidian equivalent of a dismissive wave. "Not officially, however. There are concerns about certain biological compatibilities that have recently come to light." Connor felt his stomach drop. There was no way Thawne could know about what had happened with Alani less than an hour ago. "Unless biological compatibilities," Chesson inquired, glancing briefly at Connor. "Yes," Thawne replied. "Our scientists have discovered that human biochemistry interacts with Vidian physiology in unexpected ways that could have significant cultural and social implications." Connor maintained his diplomatic poker face, but internally his mind was racing. How had Thoron learned about the incident so quickly, and why was he bringing it to an official diplomatic meeting? "I'm sure our respective scientific communities can collaborate on understanding these interactions," Cheston offered. Cautiously indeed, Thawne agreed, his gaze still fixed on Connor. "In fact, I believe one of your junior diplomats has already begun an unauthorized experiment with one of our scientists." All eyes in the room turned to Connor, who felt a bead of sweat form on his brow that had nothing to do with his earlier workout. "Mr. Mitchell," Chess said, her voice dangerously calm, "do you have something to share with this assembly?" Connor cleared his throat, diplomatic training kicking into high gear. "High Counselor Thean, with all due respect, if you're referring to my interaction with scientist Alani, it was entirely accidental and not part of any experiment." "Accidental?" Thean's voice carried a hint of disbelief. "You accidentally triggered a sacred Vidian biological process." "Yes," Connor replied firmly. "Neither of us was aware that human pheromones could affect Vidian physiology when it became apparent. I simply helped her return to her quarters discreetly." Chess' expression had moved from a diplomatic neutrality to barely concealed alarm. "Mr. Mitchell, perhaps you should elaborate on exactly what occurred." Connor hesitated, aware that Alani had wanted to keep the matter private, but with Thean already aware and bringing it to an official diplomatic channel, discretion was no longer an option. "I was exercising in the station gym when scientist Alani entered. After being exposed to my perspiration, she experienced an unexpected biological response. Her body underwent physical changes consistent with what I now understand to be the Vidian reproductive cycle." A murmur ran through the human delegation while the Vidians remained stoically silent. "And you assisted her?" Chest asked. "Yes, Ambassador. It seemed the right thing to do." Thean made a sound that might have been a scoff. "The right thing would have been to alert Vidian medical personnel immediately. Instead, you chose to escort her privately, establishing a one-on-one connection during a vulnerable biological state." Connor felt a flash of indignation. "She specifically requested no medical intervention. I respected her wishes. Her judgment was compromised." They encountered, and now we face a potential diplomatic incident. Cheston intervened smoothly. "High Counselor, while the situation is unexpected, I fail to see how it constitutes a diplomatic incident. No protocols were violated, and both parties acted in good faith. The issue, Theon said, his voice hardening, is that scientist Eleni is not merely a researcher. She is my daughter, and she is betrothed to unite our house with another prominent family union that has significant political implications for our people. The revelation hit Connor like a punch to the gut. Lonnie hadn't mentioned any of this, not her connection to Theon nor her betrothal. Furthermore, Thon continued, our traditions dictate that once the reproductive cycle is triggered, certain bonds are formed, bonds that our culture views as sacred and binding. Chest diplomatic composure finally cracked. Are you suggesting that my junior diplomat is now culturally married to your daughter? Not married, Theon corrected, but biologically synchronized in a way our traditions cannot ignore. It complicates matters significantly. Connor found his voice again. High Counselor, I had no intention of interfering with Vidian customs or your daughter's betrothal. If there's a way to reverse this synchronization, there is. Not, Thon interrupted, which is why I've come personally to resolve this matter before it escalates further. The tension in the room was palpable as Duran and Chest engaged in a silent battle of wills. Connor felt as though he were watching a high-stakes chess match where he had unwittingly become a crucial piece. Finally, Chess spoke. What resolution do you propose, High Counselor? Theon's gaze returned to calculating. In cold, Mr. Mitchell will be reassigned immediately to a post far from Nexus Station, and any Vian territory my daughter will return with me to Viridia for purification rituals. We will issue a joint statement attributing the incident to a previously unknown biochemical reaction and implement protocols to prevent future occurrences. And if we find these terms unacceptable, Chess challenged, and Thon said with deadly calm, I will be forced to reconsider the Vidian Conclave's position on several key treaties currently being negotiated with Earth. The implied threat hung in the air. Connor knew those treaties represented years of careful diplomacy and were vital to Earth's expanding role in galactic politics. Before Chess could respond, the briefing room door slid open again. Alani stood in the entrance, her transformed figure impossible to hide despite wearing a flowing Vidian robe. Her silver eyes blazed with determination as she surveyed the room. Father, she said, her voice clear and strong, I believe I should have say in my own future. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to the unexpected newcomer, whose arrival had just transformed an already complex diplomatic situation into something far more unpredictable. The diplomatic briefing room had fallen into stunned silence. Alani stood in the doorway, her transformed figure commanding attention despite the flowing robe she wore to conceal her silver hair was pulled back in a formal style, but a few strands had escaped, framing her face in a way that somehow made her look both vulnerable and determined. High Counselor Theon recovered first, his expression hardening as he addressed his daughter. Eleni, this is not the appropriate venue. For what, Father? She interrupted, stepping fully into the room. For me to have a voice in decisions that affect my life, my body, my future. Connor watched the exchange, a mixture of admiration and concern. In the short time he'd known Elani, he hadn't pegged her as someone who would directly challenge authority, especially not the authority of one of the most powerful Vidians in the galaxy. Ambassador Cheston, ever the diplomat, seized the opportunity to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should adjourn the formal meeting and allow the family to discuss this privately. No, Alani said firmly, this has become a diplomatic matter, has it not? Then it should be addressed with all parties present. She moved further into the room, and Connor noticed she walked with slight unsteadiness, whether from her physical transformation or nervousness. He couldn't tell. When she reached the central table, she placed her hands on its surface, studying herself. The biological synchronization my father speaks of is real. She acknowledged, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on Connor. But it's not what he's implying. Theon made a dismissive gesture. You are not qualified to interpret our most sacred traditions, daughter. I am a xenobiologist specializing in comparative physiology. Alani counted a flash of anger in her silver eyes, and I've spent the last hour reviewing every historical and scientific record available on spontaneous reproductive cycling. What happened is unprecedented, yes, but it does not create an unbreakable bond. Connor felt a weight lift from his shoulders, though he was surprised to also feel a twinge of Disappointment. He pushed the confusing emotion aside, focusing on the diplomatic crisis at hand. If I may, he interjected. Carefully, it seems there's a scientific question here that's being treated as a cultural one. Perhaps we should separate the two issues. Ambassador Chess nodded, approvingly. A sensible suggestion, Mr. Mitchell. Thean's expression remained stony. Impossible in Vidian culture. Biology and tradition are inseparable. That's not entirely true, Father Alani said, her voice softening slightly. Our history is full of examples where tradition adapted to new biological understandings. She turned to address the full assembly. What happened between myself and Diplomat Mitchell was indeed triggered by a biochemical compatibility we didn't know existed. His human pheromones contained compounds remarkably similar to those produced during the Vidian mating ritual. My body responded instinctively, which is precisely why this matter is so serious. Thean interjected. The physical changes my daughter has undergone are sacred in our culture. They occur only when a Vidian female has found her compatible mate. Connor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. With respect, High Counselor, it was an accidental exposure. Neither of us intended. Well-intentioned is irrelevant. Thean cut him off. The biological response has occurred by our most ancient laws. You have a needy aided, a binding connection. Elaine straightened her posture, her transformed figure more pronounced with a movement. Father, you know as well as I do that those laws haven't been enforced for generations. They were written before we understood the biochemistry of our reproductive cycles. They have not been enforced on. Thon agreed because they have not been needed. Nov Vidian has experienced a spontaneous cycle in over 3 centuries. Ambassador Cheston cleared her throat. While I respect Vidian traditions, High Counselor, I cannot agree to the reassignment of my diplomat based solely on a biological accident. Thean's eyes narrowed. Then perhaps you would prefer we make a public announcement about how human biochemistry can trigger uncontrolled reproductive responses in Vidian females. I'm certain that would benefit interspecies relations. The threat hung in the air. Connor glanced at Annie, whose emerald complexion had darkened with what he assumed was a Vidian equivalent of a blush. There is another option, Alani said quietly. All eyes turned to her. The trials of compatibility. She continued. An ancient tradition that allows for the testing of a potential bond when it forms under unusual circumstances. Thean's expression shifted from anger to surprise. You cannot be serious. The trials haven't been invoked in millennia, yet they remain part of our law, Alani countered, and they would allow us to resolve this matter without diplomatic incident or personal dishonor. Connor leaned toward Ambassador Cheston. What are these trials? He whispered. Chess shook her head, slightly indicating she was as much in the dark as he was. Eleni seemed to hear his question. The trials of compatibility are a series of challenges designed to test whether two individuals are truly suited to one another biologically, intellectually, and spiritually. If we pass, the bond is recognized. If we fail, the bond is considered a biological anomaly and can be ceremonially dissolved. And my daughter's betrothing demanded will remain intact if the trials probed the synchronization was merely an accident. Ilani replied, it's the perfect solution. Father, we honor tradition while acknowledging modern science. Connor found himself admiring Elon's quick thinking and diplomatic skill. She'd found a path that respected her culture's traditions while potentially freeing both of them from an unwanted entanglement. I'm willing to participate in these trials, he said, earning a sharp look from Ambassador Cheston, if it will resolve the situation without diplomatic consequences. Chess' expression made it clear she would word with him later, but she didn't contradict him. Publicly, Terran was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between his daughter and Connor. Finally, he spoke. The trials of compatibility require a formal declaration of intent from both parties. Are you prepared to make such a declaration? Human Connor hesitated, suddenly aware of the gravity of what he was agreeing to. He knew nothing about these trials or what they entailed. For all he knew, they could be dangerous or humiliating. But looking at Alani, her silver eyes pleading her transformed body, a testament to the bizarre situation they'd found themselves in, he found himself nodding. I am, he said firmly, as am I. Alani added. Thon's expression was unreadable. Very well. The first trial will commence tomorrow at the rising of Vidia's primary son, Ambassador Cheston. Your presence as witness would be appreciated. Chest inclined her head. Of course, High Counselor. Until then, they're in continued diplomat Mitchell will be restricted. From any contact with my daughter, preparation for the trials must be done in isolation. With that, he gestured to. His entourage and the Vidian delegation began to file out of the briefing room. Elaine lingered for a moment, her gaze. Meeting Connors, "Thank you," she mouthed silently before following her father as. The door closed behind them. Ambassador Cheston turned to Connor, her expression a mixture of exasperation and curiosity. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, "I hope you realize what you've just committed yourself to." Connor ran a hand through his still damp hair. "Honestly, Ambassador, I have no idea, but it seemed like the only way to avoid a diplomatic incident." Perhaps Chess conceded, "or perhaps you've just created a larger one. These trials could be anything: physical challenges, psychological tests, who knows? What else? I'll handle it," Connor assured her with more confidence than he felt. How bad could it be? Cheston's expression didn't inspire confidence. "I suggest you use your isolation period to learn everything you can about Vidian mating rituals and these trials of compatibility. I'll have our cultural attaché send over whatever information we have." Connor nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of his impulsive decision. "Ambassador, about Alani, did you know she was Theon's daughter, or about her betrothal?" "No," Chest admitted. "High Counselor Theon is notoriously private about his family, and Vidian betrothals, especially politically motivated ones, are rarely announced until just before the union ceremony." Connor absorbed this information, wondering what else he didn't know about Alani. "I should prepare for tomorrow." "Yes, you should," Chess agreed. "And Mitchell, try not to trigger any more interspecies incidents before then." Despite the gravity of the situation, Connor couldn't help but smile. "I'll do my best, Ambassador." As he left the briefing room, his thoughts returned to Alani, her courage in standing up to her father, her quick thinking in proposing the trials, and the look in her silver eyes when she thanked him. Whatever these trials entailed, he was determined to face them. He did not just for diplomatic reasons, but for her. Back in his quarters, Connor found a message waiting on his terminal. It was from an anonymous sender, but he knew immediately who it was from. "The first trial test physical attunement. Be ready to move as one." And Connor, "Thank you for standing with me. Few would have done the same." Connor read the message twice before it automatically deleted itself. "Physical attunement, moving as one would." Exactly had he got himself into with a sigh. He began researching Vidian customs, preparing himself for whatever tomorrow might bring. The ceremonial chamber aboard Nexus Station had been transformed overnight. What had once been a multi-purpose meeting room now glowed with bioluminescent Vidian symbols along the walls. The air was heavy with a sweet, spicy scent that Connor couldn't identify, but found strangely calming. He arrived precisely at the designated time, dressed in the garments that had been delivered to his quarters, a form-fitting black bodysuit with subtle blue accents that matched his eyes. The material was unlike anything he'd worn before, simultaneously lightweight and protective, clinging to his muscular frame like a second skin. Ambassador Chest stood to one side of the chamber, her diplomatic uniform impeccable as always. She gave Connor a slight nod as he entered, her expression revealing nothing. "Diplomat Mitchell." "High Counselor." Theron's voice echoed through the chamber. The Vidian leader stood on a raised platform dressed in ceremonial silver robes that seemed to capture and reflect the room's ambient light. "You have come to undertake the first trial of compatibility." "I have," Connor confirmed, his voice steady despite the nervousness churning in his stomach. "And do you understand that these trials are binding under both Vidian law and the In-Species Cultural Respect Treaty of 2187? Connor nodded. "I disband. Very well." Theon gestured toward a side entrance. "Then let us begin." The door slid open and Ilani entered. Connor's breath caught in his throat. She wore a bodysuit similar to his, but in a deep emerald that complemented her skin tone. The material did little to conceal her transformed figure. If anything, it enhanced it, highlighting the dramatic curves that had developed after their encounter in the gym. Her silver hair was braided elaborately with small glowing crystals woven throughout. She was, Connor realized. With a jolt, absolutely stunning. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Connor felt something stir within him, a connection that transcended the bizarre circumstances that had brought them together. The first trial, Theon announced. Tests physical attunement in Vidian tradition. Compatible mates must move as one anticipating each other's actions without words or signals. A circular platform in the center of the room began to glow. Connor Racone recognized it as a holographic projection system similar to those used in combat training on Earth. You will dance thon, continue not a choreographed performance, but a responsive flow. The system will provide musical tones and visual cues. You must respond together, moving in harmony. The trial ends when you achieve perfect synchronization or when one of you falters. Connor glanced at Alani, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. Dancing wasn't exactly his forte, but he'd been through enough combat training to have decent reflexes and body awareness. Take your positions, Thean instructed Connor, and Alani stepped onto the circular platform, facing each other up close. Connor could see the nervousness in her silver eyes despite her composed exterior. "I got your message," he whispered. "Thanks for the warning. I wish I could have told you more," she replied softly. "Just feel the rhythm and watch my movements. We need to harmonize our energy." Before Connor could ask what that meant, the first musical tone sounded, a deep, resonant note that seemed to vibrate through his very bones. A pattern of light appeared on the floor between them, pulsing in time with the music. Alani began to move her body, flowing like water. Connor tried to mirror her, but his movements felt stiff and awkward by comparison. The light pattern shifted, becoming more complex as additional tones joined the first "I don't think" thing. Alani murmured. "Feel." Connor took a deep breath and tried to let go of his self-consciousness. He focused on Alani's movements, the graceful sweep of her arms, the subtle shifts of her weight, the way her transformed body seemed to enhance rather than hinder her natural grace. Gradually, he found himself responding more instinctively when she stepped forward. He stepped back when she raised her hand. He mirrored the gesture, the music buoying complexity, and their movements accelerated to match. Then something unexpected happened. As their dance intensified, Connor began to feel a strange warmth spreading through his body, centering in his chest. From Alani's surprised expression, she felt it too, a tangible energy flowing between them, connecting them on some level. He couldn't quite comprehend what's happening. He whispered as they circled each other, their movements now almost perfectly synchronized, bioenergetic resonance. She breathed. "It's part of the Vidian bonding process. I didn't think it was possible with a human." The sensation intensified, a pleasant heat that made Connor acutely aware of every point where their bodies nearly touched. Their dance became more intimate, hands brushing against each other's bodies, moving closer until they were separated by mere inches. Connor could smell her now, a sweet, intoxicating scent that reminded him of summer rain and exotic spices. His heart raced, and not just for the exertion of the dance. The light patterns beneath their feet began to merge, forming a single unified design. The music reached a crescendo, and as if guided by some force beyond conscious thought, Connor pulled Alani into his arms, their bodies pressing together as a final note resonated through the chamber. For a moment, they stood frozen in the embrace, breathing heavily, the bioenergetic connection between them pulsing like a living thing. Connor was acutely aware of every curve of her transformed body against the heat of her skin through the thin material of their bodysuits, the way her silver eyes had darkened with emotion he couldn't name, but instinctively understood. Then the music faded and reality reasserted itself. They were standing in the ceremonial chamber, being observed by High Counselor, their Ambassador Cheston, and various officials from both delegations. Slowly, reluctantly, they separated, but the connection remained, a subtle awareness of each other that hadn't existed before. The first trial, the announcer's voice betraying a hint of surprise, is complete. The synchronization was adequate. Connor glanced at Alani, who was attempting to compose herself, though the flush of her emerald skin betrayed her lingering reaction to their dance. "The second trial will commence tomorrow," Durin continued. "Until then, the participants may interact, but must remain in public areas of the station." As the assembly began to disperse, Alani moved closer to Connor. "That was unexpected," she murmured. "The dance, or the whatever that energy thing was," Connor asked. Both her silver eyes met as a mixture of confusion and desire evident in their depths. "Humans aren't supposed to be capable of bioenergetic resonance. It's a uniquely Vidian trait." Connor thought about the warmth that had flowed between them, the inexplicable connection that had guided their movements. "Maybe we're more compatible than anyone realized." Alani's lips curved into a smile that made his heart skip a beat. "Maybe we are." And if that's true, the next trials will be even more interesting. The second trial had been even more intense than the first, where the dance had tested their physical attunement, the mental synchronization challenge had required Connor and Eleni to share their deepest memories and emotions through a Vidian neural interface Connor had experienced. Ilani's childhood on Viridia, running through fields of bioluminescent flora. The weight of expectations as a high counselor's daughter, her passion for xenobiology that led her to Nexus. Station in turn, she had witnessed his life on Earth growing up in the post-Kant era, his determination to join the diplomatic corps, the loneliness he sometimes felt as the only human in his section of the station. The experience had left them both shaken but undeniably close to the bioenergetic resonance that had surprised them during the dance, had only strengthened, creating a connection that transcended mere physical attraction. Now they stood before High Counselor Therin and Ambassador Cheston for the third and final trial. The trial of purpose. Thon announced, his voice echoing through the ceremonial chamber. Compatible mates must share not just body and mind, but vision. You will each declare what you seek from this bond, and the ancient crystals will determine if your purposes align. Connor glanced at Ilani, who stood tall despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. Her transformed figure had stabilized over the past days, her enhanced feminine attributes now seeming a natural part of her. He found her breathtakingly beautiful, not just physically, but in the brilliance of her mind and the strength of her spirit. Two crystalline pedestals rose from the floor, glowed with an inner light. Place your hands upon the crystal. Dean instructed, speak your truth. Ilani stepped forward first, her emerald fingers spreading across the shimmering surface. I seek understanding, she said, her voice clear and strong. In my research as a xenobiologist, I've always believed that the differences between species are less important than what unites us. What happened between Connor and me, this unexpected biological synchronization, isn't just a personal matter. It represents a breakthrough in interspecies compatibility. The crystal beneath her hand pulsed brighter. The bioenergetic resonance we experience shouldn't be possible between a Vidian and a hum, she continued, yet it exists. I've analyzed the data from our first two trials, and the implications are extraordinary. This could lead to revolutionary medical applications, treatments for conditions previously thought incurable, new methods of healing across species barriers. Connor felt a surge of admiration. Even in this deeply personal moment, Ilani's scientific mind was working, seeing possibilities others might miss. But beyond the science, she added, her voice softening, I seek a partner who challenges me, who sees me as more than the High Counselor's daughter or a political asset, someone who values both my mind and my heart. Her silver eyes met Connor's. I believe I found that person. The crystal flared brilliantly, then settled into a steady glow. Ilani stepped back, and Connor took her place. He placed his hand on the second crystal, feeling a warm vibration against his palm. I seek connection, he began. As a diplomat, I've dedicated my career to building bridges between different cultures and species. But until recently, I didn't realize how much I was missing. A personal connection, someone who understands both my strength and vulnerability. The crystal pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. What's happened between Ilani and me was unexpected, but it feels right. The bioenergetic resonance we share isn't just a scientific curiosity, it's a SYMB of what's possible when we truly open ourselves to those different from us. Connor took a deep breath, aware of the weight of what he was about to say. I support Elon's vision for the scientific applications of our discovery, but more than that, I want to stand beside her as she pursues it, not as a diplomatic assignment, but as her chosen partner. I'm willing to embrace Vidian customs and traditions, to learn and grow with her. His crystal flared, matching the intensity of Alan. That then, to everyone's astonishment, beams of light extended from both crystals, meeting in the center of the chamber to form a pulsing, intertwined pattern. High Counselor Theon's expression was unreadable. The crystals have spoken. Your purposes align. He paused and added reluctantly, the trials of compatibility are complete. The bond is recognized. Ambassador Cheston stepped forward. What does this mean precisely in terms of diplomatic protocol? The Ron's jaw tightened. It means that according to our most ancient laws, diplomat Mitchell has proven himself a suitable mate for my daughter. The previously arranged betrothal is nullified. A murmur ran through the assembled witnesses. Eleni moved to Connor's side, her fingers intertwining with his father. Sheena said, There's more. The data from our trials confirms what I suspected. The bioenergetic resonance between Connor and me represents an unprecedented compatibility. With your permission, I'd like to establish a research initiative here on Nexus Station, a collaborative effort between Vidian and human scientists. Thon appeared to struggle internally. Before responding, you've always been stubborn. Daughter, like your mother, his stern expression softened slightly. The research has merit. I will support it on one condition. Name it. Alani said cautiously that you both return to Viridia for a proper union ceremony. If human and Vidian are to join, should be done with full honors. Connor felt Elon's hand tighten around as we accept. He said, surprising himself with how right the words felt. Later, alone in Elon's quarters, they finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. The formal diplomatic reception had lasted hours, with officials from both species eager to discuss the implications of their recognized bond. So Connor said, brushing a strand of silver hair from Alani's face, I'm officially a suitable mate now. She laughed to sound like music to his ears. More than suitable. The crystals don't lie. Our purposes truly do align. Her expression grew serious. Are you really okay with coming to Adia with becoming part of my world? Connor drew her closer, acutely aware of her transformed body. Against as I've spent my career trying to understand other cultures, now I get to truly live one with you. There's something else. Ilani said, a mischievous glint in her silver eyes. Now that our bond is officially recognized, there's a Vidian tradition that we haven't observed yet. O'Connor raised an eyebrow. And what might that be? Instead of answering, she pulled him toward her sleeping chamber. Let me show you, she whispered against his lips. It turns out humans and Vidians are compatible in more ways than anyone imagined. As they crossed the threshold together, Connor reflected that sometimes the most profound diplomatic breakthroughs began with something as simple as a workout in the gym, and the unexpected chemistry that followed the twin suns of Iridia cast a shimmering golden violet light across the ceremonial gardens. Connor stood on the balcony of the High Counselor's ancestral home, taking in the alien landscape that would now be part of his life. Bioluminescent flora pulsed in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field, creating waves of color that rippled through the extensive grounds. 6 months passed since that fateful day in the gym on Nexus Station. 6 months of diplomatic negotiation, scientific breakthroughs, and cultural immersion that had changed Connor's life in ways he could never have imagined. Admiring the view, Elon's melodic voice came from behind him. Connor turned to see his mate, his wife, by both human and Vidian standards, approaching in a flowing silver robe that complemented her emerald skin. It's still hard to believe this is real, Connor admitted, drawing her into his arms. Her transformed figure had become a permanent part of her physiology, her enhanced curves now as natural to her as her silver hair or emerald skin. That all of this started because I didn't shower immediately after my workout. Alani laughed to sound like wind chimes in the morning breeze. The universe works in mysterious ways, though I doubt a human male sweat triggers alien reproductive cycle will make it into the official diplomatic records. No, but first human Vidian Cultural Integration Initiative has a nice ring to it, Connor replied, kissing her forehead. Their official title as joint ambassadors sounded appropriately dignified, even if their private joke was that they were interspecies compatibility specialists. The union ceremony 3 months ago had made galactic headlines, the first officially recognized human-Vidian pairing, complete with all the traditional rituals of Alani's people. Connor had spent weeks learning the intricate movements of the bonding dance, the proper intonation of the ancient vows, and the significance of each ceremonial garment. What the news reports hadn't covered were the private moments the Kines spent discovering each other's bodies. The way Alani's skin glowed faintly when they made love, the perfect fit of their forms despite their different species. Their physical connection had only deepened the bioenergetic bond that had formed during the trials. Father wants us at the council session this afternoon, Alani said, tracing patterns on Connor's chest through his diplomatic uniform. The cultural exchange program is expanding. 10 more human diplomats will be arriving next month for immersion training. Connor smiled. And how many of them will you warn about the effects of human pheromones on Vidian females? That will be covered extensively in their orientation materials, Ilani assured him, with a mischievous glint in her silver eyes, though I might leave out how pleasurable, Nikki, the side effects can be. Their research into the bioenergetic resonance between their species had yielded fascinating results. While not all humans and Vidians were compatible, those who could form bonds with remarkable healing properties already. 3 other human Vidian pairs had discovered their compatibility, though none had experienced the dramatic physical transformation that Eleni had undergone. I received a message from Ambassador Cheston this morning. Connor said the interspecies medical research facility on Nexus has been approved. They want us to oversee its establishment. Alani's eyes widened. That's wonderful news. When do they want us to return? Not for another 3 months. They know we're needed here to complete the cultural integration protocols. Connor pulled her closer. Besides, I'm still learning. Yesterday, your cousin had to explain why it's considered charming when I mispronounced the traditional dinner blessing, but scandalous when I used the wrong hand gesture during the morning ritual. You're doing remarkably well, Elin assured him. The elders are impressed by your dedication to our ways. No human has ever embraced Vidian culture so thoroughly. I have excellent motivation. Connor murmured, his hands sliding down to appreciate the curves that had first caught his attention in the gym. That day, Elon's skin flushed a deeper green at his touch. We have 2 hours before the council session, she whispered, her silver eyes darkening with desire. Is that an invitation, Ambassador? Connor asked, his voice dropping to a husky tone that he knew sent SH through her. Davidian custom, she replied with mock seriousness. Newly bonded pairs must but strengthen their connection regularly during the first year. Well, far be it from me to disrespect local customs, Connor said, allowing her to lead him back into their private chambers. Later, as they lay entwined in the afterglow of their passion, Elani traced the contours of Connor's face with gentle fingers. Do you ever regret it, leaving your life on the station behind, becoming part of my world? Connor captured her hand and kissed her palm. Not for a second, though I do have one complaint. Elin raised a silver eyebrow. Oh, I still can't pronounce your father's formal title correctly, I think. He winced at least 3 times during last week's reception. Her laughter filled their chamber, a sound that Connor knew he would never tire of hearing, as the light of Vidia's twin suns painted patterns across their intertwined forms. He reflected that sometimes the most profound journeys began with the simplest, most unexpected moments, and sometimes the scent of human sweat could change the course of 2 lives, and perhaps in time the relationship between 2 species forever.